Yeah, it should be on. Yeah. Good evening, everybody. My name is Carrie, and I am part of the programming team here at the library. And I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight for our very special conversation with Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist and Westport native, Spencer Platt. Yeah.
Thank you.
Spencer grew up in Westport and attended Staples High School. After graduating from Clark University in Massachusetts, he worked at several newspapers in the Midwest and the Northeast. Since joining Getty Images in 2001 as a New York City-based staff photographer, Spencer has covered conflicts and news stories nationally and globally in countries throughout the Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe. In 2007, he was awarded the prestigious World Press Photo of the Year for his picture of young Lebanese surveying bombing damage in Beirut during the Lebanon-Israel crisis of 2006. In 2021, Spencer was a Pulitzer Prize finalist for his team coverage of the COVID epidemic, and in 2022, just last month, he was a member of the Getty Images team that won the Pulitzer for their coverage of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Thank you.
Other awards include honors from Pictures of the Year International, Atlanta Photojournalism Seminar, the New York Press Photographers Association, and an Associated Press Award for coverage of the conflict in Albania. And just 11 days ago, Spencer was in Buffalo, covering the racially motivated mass shooting at Tops Friendly Markets and its aftermath as it rippled throughout the community. Spencer lives in Brooklyn with his wife and fellow Staples graduate, Erica Sashin, and his daughter, Vivian. Besides photography, Spencer enjoys driving motorcycles, cycling, and spending time with his family. Spencer is joined in conversation tonight by longtime Westport resident and media producer, Nancy Diamond. Nancy has spent her career producing theater, dance, and film. She is co-founder of the popular lunchtime theater series, Play With Your Food, as well as the producer of the short film series, Shortcuts, which you can see here at the library in the fall. Nancy also chairs Westport's Arts Advisory Committee. I will turn it over to Nancy to begin our conversation. Please give a warm welcome to both of them to our stage.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. And thank you, Spencer,
Thank you, Nancy,
for being here tonight.
It's great to be here. Thank you for coming out. It's a beautiful day, so beautiful evening. So, yeah, thank you.
So before we get started, we can't ignore the events of yesterday. Today must have been a very busy day in the newsroom at Getty.
Yeah, we were briefly discussing that, it's a pretty big team I think we have there. I'm thankfully not part of it. Yeah, you know, and I cover right now, so I'm based in New York City, and part of my daily coverage beat is New York City. So even on, you know, New York being kind of the global capital, there's always a nexus to anything that happens anywhere. So I had to be up this morning to cover Wall Street traders having a moment of silence. Where those pictures are run, I don't know, but somewhere. And then our new dynamic, ever-charging mayor, Eric Adams, he had a display of guns that they confiscated in New York City public schools, which when you have a child in those schools is a little dismaying, to say the least. Yeah, there's always that connection to such a horrific event. But, you know, personally, I didn't ask to go to Texas, and you know, to be honest, I'm like, just so, I feel we're at the end of our tether in terms of what the media can do. I was talking to a friend today, and who was a British guy, and he was like, I think I'm going to Texas, and I said, I just can't. More vigils, you know, the candles, the crying, and you just ask yourself, you know, this is going to happen next week. You know, you could mark it on your calendar.
Well, it was only 11 days ago that you were
Buffalo.
in Buffalo.
Yeah.
So let's switch to Buffalo, since we thought that was going to be the hot topic this evening. We didn't know that there was going to be something
Yeah.
so horrific so soon after. So tell us about covering Buffalo and the shooting at the Tops Friendly Market.
I only spent a couple of days there. I had never even actually been to Buffalo, believe it or not. I mean, it's sorry to say I've been to Lebanon 4 or 5 times. I've never been to Buffalo. And it's a remarkable city. It's a powerful city. It's one of these cities where kind of everyone kind of grew up there, has family connections, and it's really strong. And it was just devastating. I mean, when I go to these places, my company be like, oh, get there quick, whatever. And I'm just tired of airports, like a lot of people, and Ubers. And I always just like, I tell them I'm taking my motorcycle. All right, that's the deal. So, and it's a nice way to get to a place because you really get to understand the distance and the space and the land.
Wait, you rode your motorcycle to Buffalo?
Oh yeah. So.
That's a long drive.
It's a long drive, and it's a lot of boredom, a lot of time to think, but so you get there, and you already have, you kind of feel like you've already been this journey to get there, and it was, sometimes as you get to these places, and when I got there, there's no other media around. There was some TV, but there's no other photographers. So
what time did you get there?
Or
how far after the event?
Oh, it was a couple of days after. It was like 3 days after, and I was replacing another guy. And you get there, and you just know, especially in today's day and age, there's a lot of hostility to the press. So they see the cameras, and I always try to just have small cameras and be very discreet, and you're always prepared. But the people were really welcoming. I could tell that they really they understood why you're here, and they wanted the world to feel their pain, know what was going on. People were extremely welcoming, but again, it's just so sad, and you become you just end up asking having this conversation with yourself. What is the point of me being here? And then you get into this a very dark portrait of America. And I'll just take a quick aside. I left Buffalo. I had to go to Syracuse for one of the funerals of the people killed in that supermarket. And I remember I got on my bike and I took these back roads, and it was like these little incredible towns, these farm towns where Little League games are going on, and farmers are in the field, couples, everyone was like waving at me on my bike and waving back. And I thought, like, this is America. It was a nice counterbalance to like,
this should be America.
Yeah, well, it is a part of America, and you have to remind yourself of that the goodness, the decency that is still alive and out there. So I'm grateful for having that kind of experience to balance it.
So you're referencing a feeling that we heard a lot today from reporters saying that you get desensitized, and to some of these events, you learn not to feel, to handle these horrible tragedies. How do you deal with that? I long stay. A gin and tonic helps occasionally, but I do say, to be in this business, you have to be able to turn your emotions off, and really, because I see people that try to become photojournalists or get into journalism, and they become too emotionally wrapped up in the situation of the story. And you have to be able to put like a wall and distance, and always remind yourself of why you're here. You're here not to inject yourself into the story or become, carried away with the story. You have to report on it. And you're here, you're the eyes, you're the ears for millions of people out there who can't be here and need to. So it can, for me, I mean, if you're doing this for so long, I'm pretty good at it. And it can be disturbing because you just can go in and you can see things that you would never be able to sit down and watch in a movie or a film. And it doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't affect you, but you can still work. If you're in a war zone or something, and you come across, a deceased person, you're taking a picture of that. You just have to put up this kind of, internal wall and just be able to work, focus on your camera, your shutter speed, your aperture, the light, all these things. And some people have that ability, others don't, and I probably think the people that don't are a lot luckier, but it is one of the traits I think you need.
need to have. So before we get on to your
Yep.
career and the places you've
Sure.
been, you told me that you're a wire photographer.
Yeah.
As opposed to being a documentary
Or a newspaper.
or newspaper photographer. Could you explain to us what that means?
Wire photography, yeah, I mean, like most people don't know. I think the term's kind of maybe outdated. It's a little, back in the old days of journalism, you worked for The Wire, and The Wire was, what was The Wire?
AP or
Yeah.
DPI now.
Well, so I work for a wire service at Getty Images, a wire division is what we call it, and it just means you're a photographer that's just sent everywhere. You have to file. You don't do any long project. I've done. If I shoot something for 2 days, that's a long project. And you're just constantly, you're filing. What I mean filing, you're editing your photos. You're sending usually hundreds of photos every day. Like just today, I've edited and filed probably 60, 70 photos, and you're just constantly feeding the wire, is what we call it. And it's a way to work. You're constantly moving on to the next story. You're constantly covering breaking news. It's frenetic. But it's a really fast pace, and as opposed to a newspaper, if you're working for the New York Times, you're doing long-term projects, you're working with a reporter, you're often filing for tomorrow's paper, but you're filing a couple, you're discussing with an editor. I mean, I'm just feeding the pictures. When I go to a place like Buffalo, filing hundreds, there's a beautiful little cafe near that Tops grocery store, a little African-American owned cafe, coffee shop. It was, and I would just go in there. They knew me after the day, and I would just be in there all day, filing hundreds of photos, go back out, shoot, go back in. So yeah, that's what it means to be a wire photographer. So I would suggest it to anyone.
Well, speaking of breaking news, you were downtown on 9/11.
Yeah. That was.
Let's take a look
Yeah.
at your iconic shot.
Yeah, that was the big one for Getty. I had just started at Getty, maybe 6 months before that, and Getty was not that old then, and the news division was new, and I don't think we really knew the exact direction. And this was the time pre 9/11 when everyone was talking about kind of a new world order that would be global peace, and capitalism would take over, and kind of the end. I remember, if you remember, the end of history debate. I don't know if you recall that. That was, history was going to end, and it was just going to be, peace on earth. Soviet Union had gone. So when you were in the news industry, I remember Tyler Hicks and I were talking about, God, we missed the Vietnam War, we missed everything, we missed all, we would talk about this, and we were like,
The 90s was
journalism is just going to be blasé, it's going to be boring, and I think that was the feeling too when news agencies, and people were questioning, what direction we're going, and then this horrific event happens, and it just literally upended the world. As I don't need to tell any of you that, but I mean.
So where were you? And
I was at home in a place called Dumbo, and in Brooklyn, and I just heard on the radio the first plane went in, and I kind of reluctantly, my wife just said, you should probably go check that out. And I was kind of hesitant, and believe it or not, and I went out, and I got to the Brooklyn Bridge. I had forgotten my other camera. I had forgotten my wallet, and I just immediately knew, just the helicopters, the atmosphere, that this wasn't a normal commuter plane that had crashed. And then I just had my camera up for seconds. I was on the Brooklyn Bridge, and I just I was photographing the other tower burning, and then I didn't even see the plane come in, but the explosion, which just felt like it went on for minutes. This is a very primitive digital camera. It's amazing that it's held up, the colors and everything, but it was a very small file. But
and this photo was everywhere. Does
yeah,
people remember seeing this? It was really everywhere.
Yeah, so for Getty, for the news division, it was our first big photo for newspapers around the world and news magazines. So
and your first.
Definitely my first.
Photo.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we look at it? There are a couple more of this, I think.
Yeah, that's about 2 days after.
they sealed it off really quickly, and I'm glad because back I didn't have anything over my face, and we were all breathing this stuff in, and so many of the firefighters, emergency workers have since contracted cancer and passed away with all sorts of lung diseases. So I think I was actually with Tyler. We snuck in. We had to go to sneak under these cars and kind of stay there until nightfall, and then we had 5 minutes in there before they caught us. But that was it. Yeah.
And they threw you out?
Yeah. Some of the days and weeks after, and going through these the other day, it's just amazing. Seeing the city now, there's just no trace of this. It's so clean and shiny and bright, and this is it's just very profound.
Scene playing all over.
Moment in history.
So this was an example of a story, obviously, that you got on your own. Does that happen, or are you assigned stories, or do both of those things happen?
There's a little bit of give and take. I mean, anywhere there's always you want to be on everything, and you can't be on everything, and but usually a story like this, especially when it lands in your I spent months on this. This is when they caught bin Laden, and how many years? Was it after? Because it was under Obama when they caught Obama. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So that was the night when they caught him, or killed him. Called him. Yeah.
Okay, so that was a big turning point for you. Let's move on to another big turning point, which is in 2007 when you won the World Press Photo of the Year, awarded for a multi-image story that explores the theme of social relevance. Yeah. 5 young Lebanese are riding in a convertible through the rubble of South Beirut during the Lebanon War. So tell us how this one came about.
Well, this photo actually proved, it did win the award and everything, and it turned out it was a huge headache for me, a massive headache, because the women in the car, after the award was announced, all these reporters, not all, but a couple of reporters descended to Lebanon to find these women. Which is what they do so the women, which I didn't care, I knew it, and it wasn't like I manipulated it or set it up. They were driving. This was it's in a really poor part of Beirut. It's very Muslim Shia, very conservative area of Beirut, and this is the area that had been bombed during the war with Israel. And so if you can kind of see some of the people in the background. That's what the residents look like. All the women are in headscarves. I was just there 2 months ago. It hasn't changed. It's very Shia, Hezbollah. So you're sitting there. I'm sitting there, and there's all these cars. This is the first day of the ceasefire. All these families are coming back to the neighborhood. Their cars are loaded with debris, whatever they could salvage from their homes. And all of a sudden, I see a red Mini Cooper, and Mini Coopers. If you would do a double take back then, if you saw one on a New York City street, because they were new. Not many people had them, and here I am in this conservative neighborhood in a bombed out area of Lebanon, and a Mini Cooper convertible is coming by, and
no less.
A red one, and then these people in there, and I got 3 shots off, and I couldn't even get more of the car. One of my editors said "Oh my God, you almost had it because you didn't have enough of the car," and I'm sorry, but in any case, In any case, so this guy, Gert van der Stok, a Belgian reporter, found the women, and they said, and the driver, they said this was a donated car from a refugee group, and they were in clothes. They actually said they were all in donated clothes, and they lived there. And it's amazing.
So they were Lebanese from the neighborhood.
These are rich Christian Lebanese, and I don't know if you can see it on this photo, but one of the women actually has a cross. The guy his name is Jad or something. They're all wealthy Lebanese, and the woman I was working with, my translator fixer, she was kind of part of that crew, and she would tell me, "Yeah, I know who these people are." And there's pictures on Instagram of them partying on rooftops, and they said they were, and so the international media, for the first time in my career, I had the media turn on me, and really respected newspapers like the Financial Times, the BBC, and they said, they had these headlines say, Western reporter gets the story wrong. And now I would really fight it tooth and nail, but back then I was just kind of like, I stood up for myself, but so this is funny. So the reporter, Gert, I wrote him, I said, this is not true. You need to put a correction. These women, they don't live in that neighborhood, and they're wealthy Lebanese. And I wasn't condemning them. In the caption, I just put affluent Lebanese drive through a neighborhood. So 5 years after this photo and all the dust up, I was on the border of Libya in a little hotel where we all descended. It was the beginning of the Arab Spring. And I check into this hotel, and this guy, I knew who he was, Gert Van Stock, was checking in. And I look at him, and it went through my mind, okay, are we gonna this is Libya, we're in the border of Libya, it's lawless, you can just do whatever you want. And he looked at me and he apologized, and he goes, hey man, I'm sorry, and he goes, why don't you take my rental car for the day? And
I'm like, Mini Cooper?
No, yeah, that's a good, yeah, it's a bright Mini Cooper. So that was it. So, you win an award like that, and it opens some doors, but it also, and I think that's, with social media today, that's only, gotten increasingly more difficult.
Did we have Instagram in 06?
No, we didn't. No, there was no. Well, at least, I didn't have it. Yeah.
So why do you think they chose this one?
I don't know. I think for me, it just represents, it's kind of the cliched contrast of beauty in Lebanon, and you have this bomb, then you have the beauty, you have the people, you have the car, you have, it's kind of the beauty of chaos, which I do like to try to, I try to replicate this photo, but it rarely happens. But I think that's what you have to do in good photographs. You can't, war photography often becomes cliched. It's just dead people, it's suffering, and we're all guilty in my profession of that. And I think it often tunes people out. And a photo like this, it makes the people that don't know a lot about Lebanon, they see a photo like this, and it just kind of opens their eyes a little bit, maybe their curiosity about the country. Because I was just there 2 months ago, and it's an incredibly diverse, crazy, insane, complicated place. I think it's complicated, and good news photos need to be complicated. So, yeah.
So I'm sure we have some people interested in the technical aspect of what you do. So what kind of equipment do you use for this? Or
I use very simple equipment,
that was you in 2006.
Yeah, that's in Iraq. That's yeah.
But it was the same year.
No gray hair there. Smoking a cigarette.
Is that a cigarette?
Yeah. But I just keep it simple. Equipment today is so technical, and it's so I really tried to keep, and I try to be discreet. I think you can get carried away with equipment is so big today, and I really like to kind of blend in as best I can, and not necessarily look like a news photographer.
And do you travel alone?
Yeah, usually, yeah. I like traveling alone.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't go with a reporter or anything like that. No.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's move to Sudan and Africa, and tell us about your work with Doctors Without Borders.
I've done some work with Doctors Without Borders, a partner in stories. It's an amazing continent, and it's a place. This is he was getting a vaccine. I want to say polio vaccine. This was, I believe, Central African Republic. Yeah, this is Central African Republic. So they often work, MSF works in the most remote parts of the world. They're fantastic. And just, I used to cover these areas a lot more, and I would like to get back to Congo and to CAR. And some of the areas are more difficult today because of the Islamic radicalization in some of these countries. It makes it a lot more precarious. But I really believe places like this just, they kind of get left out of the headlines, get left out of the paper unless something huge catastrophe happens.
So is this the kind of place you also would have only gone for a day or two?
No, I'm a place like this, I'll be for a couple weeks. you know.
Do we have other shots? Here we go.
Yeah, this is Central African Republic, burning field. There's actually burning fields to renew the crops. So yeah, and Central Africa, it's just an amazing. It's just one of those countries where so few people know about or have ever been, and it's a massive country. It's about the size of Texas, and it's just just kind of utterly kind of forgotten. So yeah, so I do try to get there, and it's I'm constantly reminding my editors this.
When you were there, was it humanitarian aid?
Yeah, but there's always there is always fighting going on. There's always disease going on, always. And now bizarrely the Russians have sent their Wagner. I don't know if you've heard of that unit. It's this special unit that's pretty evil. They've taken over from the French in Central African Republic. So it's probably even nastier. Yeah. So, so when I'm in a place like this, I'm just spending my time, a lot of wandering, I have usually someone, a local person that speaks the local dialect and kind of helps me, but with this kind of work, you're just constantly driving, looking, talking, going, poking your head in places, meeting people, and just hoping that something turns up a photograph.
And how are you at the end of the day? Is your adrenaline rushing, or are you exhausted?
No, I remember being, I think it was in Car or Congo, and I remember you end up staying in the most bizarre. A lot of time you stay with missionaries. There's always wherever you are in Congo, you can find. I don't care how remote the village is. You can find a small group of Belgian or Italian nuns, like in their 80s. Always. And they're always glad to give you space, and they have food and water. So that's another. You just find these people, and they've given their life to this cause. It's really inspiring. But
do they find security for you? Because in a lot of places, it's not that safe.
That's a whole nother. Now. Especially in places like Ukraine or everything, so many news agencies work with private security agencies, and they really kind of direct your movements a lot more. Luckily for me, especially in Africa, I'm just totally on my own, and I'm not really bothered by anyone. Yeah, you always have your difficult experiences, but usually it goes pretty well.
So you don't just cover war and famine. Occasionally you do some sports photography, and you are a bicyclist, or a cyclist. So you must have been delighted to cover the Tour de France.
I got my one and only opportunity to cover the Tour de France, which was probably, I have to say, like the highlight of my career. Iraq and all these big wars are stories, but you sit on the back of a motorcycle for a month, a driver who drives a motorcycle, and you're on the back and you're just shooting, and you're just going through all these, rural France and into the Pyrenees and the Alps, and it's just, it is like, you talk about adrenaline. If I had my way, I would cover cycling I would just set my calendar to cover the Tour and maybe some other races, because the camaraderie is amazing. The cyclists are just totally beyond insane. I've never seen athletes like these guys. And they do all these crazy things, like, the motorcycle drivers know the cyclists because there's only so many motorcycle drivers are allowed to cover the tours because it's so technical. So they're like all one big family. So some of the top riders would come up on a flat stage or a motorcycle, grab the mirror and just rest and get pulled and our driver's name was Kuhn, and be like, hey Kuhn, how's the family? Oh, good Fabian, and it'd be going on for like 5 minutes. Good to see you, Kuhn, and take off. So it was a lot of that, it was wonderful.
How long were you there?
5 weeks. The tour is a month, and then there's a week before, and really, and the French just. It's just more than sport. It's their culture. It's like high church for them, So, yeah, I really, and I think I was talking to you about this earlier. For me, I shot it like a news event. Instead of a sports photographer would shoot it differently. much more concentrated on just on the riders. For me, yeah, the riders were interesting, but it was just like the people surrounding the riders, the crashes, the chaos of it. That's what fascinated me. And I remember, so you have these these doctors that are on these motorcycles, and they're literally, they're patching people as they're riding. So a rider is like riding, and then you got these doctors are hanging out, and they're just stitching and wrapping, and it's just insane. It's like nothing I've ever seen. So I hope one day, if I can get back to anywhere, I do get to go back to the Tour de France.
When were you there?
It was about 7 or 8 years ago. Yeah. It's a bit of
Incredible.
too long. Yeah.
Okay, so we started. I'd like to see the rest of these. I don't know how many more there are, but this really is amazing. Did you wish you were on one of those bikes? Did you fantasize
No,
about that?
that's not. No, I mean when you're in the Alps with these guys, it was actually Lance Armstrong's last tour, and knowing what we all know about him now, but like really like riding next to him on the motorcycle for hours, you can say, yeah, he was doping, but for a guy he was my age when I was covering him, and it's suffering and it's dangerous, and I don't care what you're on, it is still really, really, really tough. It's grueling. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so the image that was on the screen when we all first got here was from January 6th. So let's
yes,
go back
don't
to
forget
it.
about that.
Let's pivot back
Yeah.
to January 6th. So this is one of 20 photographs, 20 or so,
20 or so, yeah, I think so, yeah.
photographs that were submitted from the Getty team.
Getty team, yeah.
There were 5 of you.
Yep.
And you all won the Pulitzer Prize earlier this month for a distinguished example of breaking news photography,
yep.
Comprehensive and consistently riveting photos of the attack on the U.S. Capitol. So tell us how that day unfolded.
Oh, God.
Start at the very beginning.
Having covered Trump for many years before this, and I've been to so many of the rallies, I've seen it. It never really descended. I mean, so some people would think they always descended to chaos, but they usually didn't. It was usually controlled, and I didn't think in a million years that this would happen, and my colleagues didn't think this would happen. They had put up the night before. They put up these massive fencing around the White House. And I remember walking around the night before, taking pictures, and hearing some of these people who attacked, like talking about, we're going to storm. And I was just laughing to myself, like, what are you going to storm? How are you going to even get near it? I mean, unbeknown to us, they had like such a thin layer of police. And so I was covering the rally at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, and I kind of got there late, and I got stuck in just a crowd. I couldn't move. You couldn't get out of it. It was like the worst like rock concert event. I thought it was going to be a stampede, and I was like desperate to get to the front. And
you were on foot at that point.
I'm on foot, and I eventually I had to climb under scaffolding, because they had set up all this scaffolding for the inauguration already, for Biden's inauguration. So I had to like climb under the scaffolding, and cell phones weren't really working. I couldn't really see much. It's one of these examples, like when you're in the heart of it, you really don't know what is going on. I mean, it wasn't until I got back to a hotel that night that I knew anyone was killed. I didn't even, I just didn't hear it. And in the end, I didn't even know, two of my colleagues were inside because they cover Congress, that's their beat. So they had been there. And I didn't even know until I got back to the hotel that people were that the protesters had gotten inside. You just couldn't really see it from where I was. So it was just, so the scaffolding, and then parts of the scaffolding started coming down, and I was terrified that the whole thing was going to fall down. That would be the end, So it was just such a chaotic experience.
So you did not know that it had gotten out of control?
I knew it had gotten out of control from where I was. I knew the crowd was massive, but it was hard. This guy, that was Nancy Pelosi, right?
Male,
yeah,
right?
So he just like popped up and showed me that and then disappeared back into the crowd. It was really hard. It's just one of these news events that was just, it was so chaotic. There was so much going on. There was so much rumor. The phones started going off. Curfew, 6 p.m. And it wasn't until I really got back and was able to turn on the news to really understand the enormity. And we're still learning the enormity. It took weeks and weeks and months for it all to come out. So you can imagine being there, one person in this crowd. It was really difficult to get an idea of just how massive an event it was. Yeah.
So I was going to ask you if you were afraid, because I assumed that at some point you figured out that it was out of control, but...
One thing, when you deal with the Trump folks, or any folks, whatever, left, right, center, you try to, I don't want to say dress the part, you try to blend it. You don't want to stand out. So a few of my colleagues really stood out, and they had a hard time. A couple of them got beat up, really roughed up. I travel light, I dress like this, I say I'm pressed, I don't lie, or, I usually have a press pass, but if you're discreet, and I never had anyone bother me. And it was, I think they were just too busy, breaking things and trying to get to the Capitol to worry about someone like me. But it was a kind of crazy day.
So let's look at that. Let's look at the award winner again.
Well, so that one photo was part. I don't know how many were actually. I think it was for our whole team. It was like over 20. This was one of mine.
It looks like he's looking right at the camera. Was he?
Yeah. I didn't stop to get his name or anything, and
Didn't ask for his autograph? Or...
No. The Trump presidency was, as you all know, extremely, visual 4 years. It's I never dreamed when I'll take you a quick story. On election night, I was covering Donald Trump at the Hilton. And all the A-listers were at the Javits Center covering Hillary. And so I pulled up about 5 o'clock at the Hilton. I got in line. I have a very old friend. He's a reporter for The New Yorker. And he looks at me. He's on the phone. He goes, Spencer. He goes, I swear to you, he goes, it's over. Hillary's won. It's a deal. It's like, and this guy he's a bright guy. He knows a lot about politics. He knows, and he's got like 2 phones, and he's going over figures. And I called my wife, and I go, yeah, honey, I should be an early night. Get some champagne or whatever. We'll hang out. We'll have a drink. It's over. And sure enough, I think it was like 3 a.m. when Trump came out. So that started a chaotic 4 years, and I had kind of been, I had been predicting that something was gonna, because I was covering Trump rallies in the last days, and they were massive. And I had covered some of Hillary's in the last days, and they were not massive. And I remember telling friends, because I would drive a motorcycle out to Pennsylvania to cover some of these rallies, and I would just see, once you get an hour outside the city, it was like Trump. And I tell people, I said, this, I don't care what, the New Yorker's saying or whatever, this doesn't look great for people that are voting for Hillary. And sure enough, that's the way it went. So we'll see, we're right back there. We're getting midterm elections. And
tell us how you apply for a Pulitzer. How does that work?
You have to speak to my editors. Yeah, you send in an entry.
You send it. You do.
Yeah,
send
and it's a big process.
So they don't just discover you. You have to.
No. I think that's another award. What's the one? The Genius Award, where they kind of just call you out of the blue and
they
declare
don't
you're
call
a
you
genius.
out of the blue.
No. Yeah, I guess not. But no, it's funny because the Pulitzer, I was covering. I was not feeling great. I was just kind of down, and I was covering. I was covering a double homicide out in Queens. And I was the only photographer there, and I was like, why am I here? Why? There's like a guy from like Channel 11 and me, and it's kind of tied into the gun story. I've been trying to cover guns and violence in New York City, and I just thought to myself, And I got on the BQE and I'm in traffic and my phone starts going off and I try to ignore it, and then finally I pull over in the BQE and you all know the BQE, there's trucks and chaos and my editor is screaming, we won, we won. I'm like, all right, it's, things change, I'm not in Queens anymore,
That's great. So you've traveled all over the world. You've seen a lot. And this is obviously a high point. It's got to be a high point for you, right? Now you've won the Pulitzer.
Yeah, it's an honor, really
So
is, yeah.
What next? Where do you want to be? What do you want to be covering? Will you have any more say in what you cover?
I'd hope so. We'll see. But I think as I was mentioning, I understand the importance of global situations and what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, and there's so many great people there now, and so many great photographers. I mean, I do like covering America. I think there's a lot of pressure to go. All my colleagues, freelancers, staffers, everyone is just wants to run to Ukraine, which is important. This is I covered a lot of the opioid epidemic over the years, and some of these are kind of tough, so I apologize. But this is in Kensington, Philadelphia. So I just think there's so many issues in America right now.
These are worth seeing, by the way.
Whether it be opioids, poverty, guns, race, you name it, and it needs coverage, and Ukraine needs coverage. A lot of places need coverage, but I do feel a need to kind of focus on America. I just feel we're at such a chaotic point right now.
This is still in Kensington.
Yeah, this is Kensington. It's just a terrible, sad story there. It's just an open air. It's America's most open air drug market. It's just people freely using, shooting up, selling, dealing, and you think to yourself, and this woman was shooting up with her son, it's tough. And it's hard to work in that area. There's no police. I mean, if they want to take your cameras, the cops aren't going to do anything in this place. And this was I was just there covering the heroin, and then there's a shooting, and there's shootings every day. It's tough. So Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York. The opioid epidemic is so. I mean, I'm sure you all have been reading about it, but it's just so powerful. It's so sad. COVID, so
And the fallout from COVID.
the fallout from COVID,
The homelessness and.
the homelessness, right?
So how do you go about following this desire of yours? How do you get more of these stories and these beats?
I am fortunate at Getty. I do have editors that will listen and care about what's going on, and it's not I just can't say I want to go do this, that. I do have to do my research on these stories, and I'm not the most patient when it comes to that. So much of what I do, and it's a lot of walking, wandering, looking, and there's different kinds of reporting styles. Some of my colleagues are very good on doing their research, getting contacts, and I'm more of a street photographer, and that's who I was really influenced by growing up. The great Magnum street photographers, Robert Frank, and people like that. And I have a firm belief in so many great photos just come out of just looking, wandering, walking, talking to people all the time, and just So. But again, my editors are very receptive to it, and I think they understand the need for this kind of coverage to our clients. Yeah.
So what do you say to I'm sure there are some here or at home, the young people that dream of becoming photojournalists? What's the path?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, Westport has had a number of them, as strange as it may be. I would really sit down, like old school, and look at photo books and look at some of the greats, and really.
And
first,
who you mentioned one? Who your influences were?
Well, I mean, people like Robert Frank and Ernst Haas is probably my favorite photographer. He was a Austrian, moved to New York, in the 50s, and just an amazing, if you ever get a chance, Ernst Haas. And he was just incredible. Kind of a street photographer, but covered everything. And not so much war, and kind of a photojournalist, but not really. But you're looking at books like that, it's a classic photo book. So you have to have an eye and have to know what you want. I think that's where you start. And then, you just go out and do a story. And yeah,
pitch it.
And pitch it. You know how it works.
Pitch it.
And people always say journalism's dead, and journalism is not dead by any means. It's just changed dramatically. I bumped into an old radio reporter from CBS News. He retired, and I saw him on the street like a month ago, and he was telling me he was like old school. 10-10 wins type, or a break, and he was just telling me how radio is, his kind of radio is just dying, and like 10-10 wins, all the reporters are, and it's not, radio is probably doing better than ever, but it's just changed formats, it's more long-term, there's more documentaries, the NPR has really taken off. So photojournalism the same way. And
so you have now social media, Instagram. So
social
how has
media.
that impacted the industry?
Social media is great. I mean, but I excuse me, I have trouble with social media just because I enjoy it in one respect, but I see what it does to my child. I see what it does to other kids. I see how it becomes extremely addictive, and that's distressing. So I definitely have a love-hate relationship with it, but it is a way to kind of get your images, your pictures, your stories out there to an extremely global audience, and kind of.
Do you actively use Instagram?
I use it, yeah, I do. I'm taking a week pause off it, which I tend to do for time to time.
That's
but yeah.
your cue to put out your handle so everybody can follow
Sorry?
you. That's your cue to put out
Right,
your handle
right.
so everyone can follow you
Yeah,
on Instagram.
yeah, but it's changed the profession a lot. But that said, I do think it's turned younger people into better visual consumers. Maybe I'm being a little too optimistic with that, but I do. The power of the picture is just more ever present in our lives than ever. So I think we owe that to social media. Yeah.
So I think this is a good time to take a little break for any questions. If I think we have a microphone set up over there. If anybody would like to come up and ask Spencer a question.
Or just raise your hand, or.
Well, I think because we're streaming,
Oh, right.
we have to do it on the microphone. Go ahead, John. Just go over to the mic.
Okay. Very. Wow.
So where are you working tomorrow, or where are you working next week?
Oh, good question. I don't know. I have to bring my car in very early tomorrow. I'm probably going to do something over the weekend with. This is the big weekend of summer, right?
Yep.
Yeah, the first
Big art festival here in Westport.
Okay, that's an idea. New York is as you know, extremely dynamic. There's if nothing's happening in the morning by 2 p.m., there's some. We've just had so many unfortunate incidents, and I don't know how many of you are going in the city often. I will say that downtown is like totally back. The restaurants are packed. The Midtown is, it looks like it did pre-pandemic. I know the numbers aren't there, but it's amazing. But then you do have these random stories, and I find it difficult to cover these because I have responsibility to cover them, like a shooting on the subway that happened. 11 people, I believe, were shot. That was last month. It's all.
It's hard to keep up.
Yeah, so I was covering that. I got there very early for that, and you're very conflicted because you're a New Yorker. You have pride in your city. You want the world to see the city coming back after the nadir of the COVID epidemic, where you had people in refrigerator trucks, and so now the city's back. Then you have an incident like that, and you have to cover it. So I'm always kind of conflicted about what I cover. I really don't have much of a. I'm not going to tell my editors, or I'm not going to cover that because it's a bad image in New York. But no, when I am in the city, it's a mix of everything, and that's what I enjoy. And I drive around on my motorcycle all day, and yeah, I just kind of talk with editors and take. It's not a bad. Sometimes you complain to yourself, and and then you have to remind yourself you got pretty good. It's not bad, and it is an incredible city. It really is. It's really dynamic.
So you're going to wait and see when you get
I
assigned?
will, yeah, and I'm sure something will come through
Something
tonight.
will come,
So,
okay.
yeah.
Anyone else want to take a stab at the mic while she's getting ahead? Yeah, it would be good to line up if you, in the interest of time.
Hi. You may not agree with this statement, but I'd like to get your view on it. Why do you think the opioid crisis, in my view at least, has been so undercovered by the media, generally speaking?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. Yeah. And I would agree with you on that. I mean, I'm going to keep my objectivity as a journalist, and I do think it goes back to the places. It's mainly, I can't give you a statistic off the top of my head, but it is primarily white, working class, poor. A lot of it is in places which I've covered: West Virginia, Kentucky, Kensington, but the worst, Ohio. Those are the worst hit states. Ohio has been devastated. These are parts of the country, and this is a much bigger discussion, but this is what, kind of the elites on the coast call flyover country. And I think it even ties back to what happened with why we have President Trump. I think a lot of these people are marginalized. You had manufacturing in the 60s and 70s disappear, go to China, especially under NAFTA. These places were, these great American classic cities from Detroit on down, just became devastated. When I was in Buffalo, I was driving around these streets, and in downtown, it's just empty, old factories, and this was Buffalo. Yeah, I mean, Buffalo was a thriving, one of the great American cities, and now it's a shell of itself. So I think it goes back to that. These are marginalized people without a voice. They live in this part of the country that I think coastal elites have ignored. A lot of these counties, a lot of these states went for Trump because of that, because they felt ignored, felt marginalized. Under the Clinton administration, under NAFTA, a lot of people got rich. NAFTA was great for some, but NAFTA just, that's a big debate there, but NAFTA just devastated, working class. It took a real hit to working class America. And this is the descendants of those people. These are the kids that never left, these towns in West Virginia. When I go to these places, I remember being in West Virginia, and it was in the morning. It was a really small city in West Virginia, and I was waiting. I just needed a person on the street. And I kept seeing this door on Main Street, open, close, open, close, open, close. And I said, okay, it's got to be a diner. It's 7 o'clock, on a Tuesday. Show up, and it's a pharmacy. And it's all these people pulling up, and they're like, they're just like missing teeth, and they're just getting their, it was like an opioid mill. It was amazing. So yeah, that's a great question, and I don't, the Times is, all the major newspapers, they've been doing great coverage of the companies and the Sackler families and all that stuff. But yeah, you don't see a lot of on the ground kind of reporting on, on the lives of these people. Or not, it's out there, but there's not enough of it. Yeah.
Really good question.
A couple of comments. I'm from Buffalo, so I'm glad you were welcomed.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think you graduated from Staples?
I did, yeah.
And,
just barely.
Yeah,
but
but you're the third photographer that I've heard. Lindsay O'Dario, Tyler Hicks, and you, and that's fascinating to me.
Yep.
I'm a researcher, so I'm interested in how you collect data. You're really collecting data, as I see it. And so I'm interested in your process. Do you shoot everything as fast as you can? And then secondly, do you then edit what you send to your editor? And thirdly, if you have time, how you've grown as a photographer?
Okay. Thank you. That's a great question.
Need a 60-second answer.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, collecting data, sure. Again, I don't work, If let's say if I was at a newspaper, I would be with a reporter. The reporter would be doing most of the, getting the facts, and being a wire news photographer, I have to do that. And so I will collect, I'm not doing interviews with people, in-depth interviews. If there's someone in my photo and I need their name or kind of their relation to the event. And then I upload my photographs, and I have to be very quick. We put in a fairly extensive caption that gives a context and a date and the names, and then they're sent out. So most of the data is really just the image. There's not, and then the photos, they'll either stand alone or they'll be coupled with an article or a story. But you still have to be very, that's the one thing I don't think I grew up, and like Tyler grew up, and we worked at newspapers, and that was so important. That's like the biggest loss for today's generation, because there's so few newspapers. It's so hard to get an internship. And when you spend a year, 2 years, 3 years at a small town newspaper, you learn the process of what it means to be a reporter and collect information and put stuff in, and to be journalistically ethical, And I see younger reporters today, unfortunately, they've just missed that whole process. And you have now just an increase of incidents where people are manipulating scenes, they're manipulating situations, and kind of this ironclad code of journalism is being kind of chipped away at.
What's real news?
Yeah.
Interesting. We need to start wrapping up, so I'd like to circle back to local as a young Westport man. You've been incredibly generous with your time with Westport, which everybody really appreciates. In 2013, you donated one of your photos to the Westport. To the Westport Public Art Collections. For those of you that don't know, Westport maintains a collection of more than 1,500 artworks, which are all over town buildings and Center for Senior Activities, etc. So tell us about this photograph and why you chose to donate it.
This was in Lebanon, and I think I enjoyed the light, the scene, the humanity of it, the look on the woman's face of kind of beauty but concern, and to me, it represents the daily life of the overwhelming majority of people in this world, a struggle to get water, to bathe, to eat. So.
The things that we take for granted here.
Exactly. So, and also the aesthetics of it, and that's always important. I mean, you don't want to try to make poverty look beautiful, but if you're going to attract a reader, stop a reader, especially in this age where we're distracted by so many images, you have to add, a sophisticated element to it. So, and you don't always achieve it, but sometimes you think you do. So.
Well, you should know that this photograph lives in the photojournalism classroom at Staples High School to serve as an inspiration for the students, whom you presented to in 2014, the England staff, and spent some time with them in the classroom, which was also greatly appreciated. Spencer also had his first solo exhibition of his works, Fractured Photographs by Spencer Platt, at the former Westport Art Center. So this is Spencer addressing the class in 2014. And finally, you know that I chair the Westport Arts Advisory Committee, and in 2001, we started a program called the Horizon Award. And
that's an old one.
You were the first individual winner of Westport's Horizon Award in 2002, young Spencer.
Yes.
And that award was created for up-and-coming artists under the age of 32 who had already demonstrated success in their chosen field. It was our vote of confidence in you and what you had already accomplished. There you are in 2002. You certainly have not disappointed, Spencer. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Nancy.
Please stay safe.
Thank you.
And come visit again.
No, thank you. Thank you. That was great.